aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. We will now convene the Mesa City Council study session for Thursday, May the 7th. The first item on our agenda for this meeting is to hear a presentation, discuss, and provide direction on an update on the Mesa Cares program, focusing on the Mesa Cares Small Business Assistance and Reemergence Program. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're excited to just give you an update. We are rolling this program out on Monday, May 11th, so that's upon us quickly, but we wanted to share with you some final details and specifically where we are on the outreach. So Jaye O'Donnell's here to provide that briefing. Jaye?
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's nice to be here again today. I am going to provide a brief update on the Mesa Cares Small Business Reemergence Program, particularly focused today on the Financial Assistance Grant Program. We'll go briefly over the final application for the financial assistance piece. We will review the eligibility along with frequently asked questions that are published and were published yesterday, and will continue to be updated as we make them more comprehensive. Then we'll also cover the final timeline of the application process, when it's open, closed, and then the evaluation period that we're recommending. We'll talk about the award process and distribution of the funds, as well as the technical assistance program that we will be launching in a couple of weeks. So you have a little bit of an overview for that program. The goal of the Small Business Reemergence Program is to provide meaningful assistance to as many Mesa-based businesses as possible that were negatively affected due to the pandemic. And I thought it was important to show that the alignment of this program really works with the city's Office of Economic Development mission, which is to enhance Mesa's economy, supporting the creation of quality jobs. So we work with companies, small to large companies, and really focus on improving the quality of life for residents. The Mesa Cares Small Business Reemergence Program, as I mentioned last week, is a grant program. We were purposeful in making this a grant program and not a loan program. It is designed to assist eligible Mesa businesses with up to 90 days of utilities and rent or mortgage payments. And we will award based on the number of applications and the funding that's available. But it's really aimed at businesses who have experienced interruption caused by required closures. At the very beginning of the application to determine eligibility, there are 3 basic questions or qualifiers. Businesses must be an eligible business type located at a physical commercial address in the city of Mesa. Business must not have received any CARES Act funding through the SBA or other federal programs at this time. And businesses must have suffered negative financial impacts due to executive orders that mandated closure or limited their service options. So as they go through and answer these questions, there will be information on there that if they answered, no, I don't fit into this category, there are other programs that may be available to them, and we'll be able to do intake on those and hopefully guide them toward our technical assistance programs, as well as other resources that have been available or that have been created since COVID. We've also launched a website where info is available now, and we continue to update it as we fine-tune the information, but it is mesaaz.gov/caresbizgrant. It does describe the program in full and eligibility as well. And the eligibility and ineligibility is aligned with other federal programs. We tried to do that so that we focused on SBA lending standards and made sure that our program aligned with that to be in compliance. So just to remind you, when we started this work, we wanted the program to focus on small business stabilization and those businesses who did not receive other federal funds. So there were questions last week about whether to include franchises, publicly traded companies, and nonprofits. And after further research, we really thought that using the SBA standards would help with this program a lot. So I'm just going to go quickly through the ineligible, and I'm just going to name a few of the category types, but there are other ineligible businesses listed on our frequently asked questions on the website. So publicly held companies will not be eligible for this program, and any franchises that are not licensed to Arizona headquartered franchisees will also be ineligible. And then there are other types of businesses that you might imagine will be ineligible, like gambling establishments, businesses who are engaged in the cannabis trade, and also businesses that are owned in whole or in part by any City of Mesa elected official or employee. So there are a few others. I didn't want to publish the entire list on a PowerPoint slide because you wouldn't be able to read it, but these are the main categories. And then additionally, after a lot of back and forth trying to figure out how to handle nonprofits, we again went back to SBA and focused on for-profit businesses for this program. And I just wanted to let everyone know there are other programs that we're using to help nonprofit agencies here locally. As you know, we're working through CARES funding with the food banks, low-income housing organizations, and in addition to that, we also plan to do some cooperative marketing and partnership with nonprofits like LISC, Rail Mesa, Mesa Chamber of Commerce, and other businesses, including NEDCO, other nonprofit agencies, to deliver some of the technical assistance programming that we know businesses need. To let you know how we're doing outreach to get the word out about this program, we have formally partnered with the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, the Asian Chamber of Commerce, and the East Valley Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and we're welcoming proposals from other organizations, particularly focused on those small and micro businesses, including minority-owned and women-owned businesses. So we do expect to get a proposal coming in soon with from LISC and Rail Mesa, so we're looking forward to that. But we're trying to really make sure we are using those nonprofit organizations who already have stakeholders and constituencies in the demographics that are harder to reach, but that are really especially geared for this program and that we need to have apply for this program. The other marketing tactics and mediums that we're using are some of the basics, press releases. We did a press release yesterday. The website's already blowing up. Our social media is doing really well, and so word is out. The call center's busy. We're doing interviews. Mayor and Councilmember Luna are doing videos for us in English and in Spanish. Social media advertising will be done in English, Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Filipino. And then we also have other venues that we're using, including print advertising and direct email campaigns. So we've also done outreach to recontact the businesses that we surveyed to inform them of this program and the launch date. And the integrated and interactive and very intense 20-day marketing campaign started on Tuesday of this week. The timeline. The website is up with the FAQs. It is live now. The online application will be available Monday, May 11th at 8 a.m. The application period is 2 weeks, so it will close on Sunday, May 24th at 5 p.m. And we do require that all verification documents must be submitted at that time, or the application will be considered incomplete. Call center staff will be available to assist from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days a week. The evaluation period we anticipate will be approximately 7 to 10 days after the applications close. And during that time, we will present to council with the recommendations for awards. Award notifications will then be made to recipients with an acceptance clause and a certification that the funds will be used to pay the rent and utilities as directed by the program. Once the city receives the formal acceptance from the company, the money will be distributed directly to them. This is a multi-pronged approach to helping Mesa businesses. The Financial Assistance Grant Program is only one of the 3 tiers. The second piece is a technical assistance program that we will launch toward the end of May, beginning of June. As I mentioned, we're looking for partners now to help deliver the programming. And then there will be a marketing program later in the late summer or early fall to target local consumers and businesses to encourage them to shop and eat locally, and especially in those stores and restaurants that were closed. We also anticipate targeting the visitor market, leisure travelers in particular, including the drive markets and groups, to attract them back to Mesa to boost hotel occupancy, which is in dire need of support. With that, I will open it up for questions and comments and discussion.
Thank you very much, Jaye. And again, thank you to you and all you've been working, all those city staff and community people you've been working with to develop this program so quickly and so well. Council, questions or comments regarding what you just heard? Yes, Councilmember Duff.
Thank you very much. I have a few comments. Thank you, first of all, to Jaye and to the entire team in economic development and city management for putting together a program that's very fast, so quickly, and also moving up the award dates. We were at July last week, and now we're into June, and I know that makes a difference. So thank you for all the hard work. I know you've been burning the midnight oil. I just wanted to clarify for our businesses that it's not a first come, first serve that we've experienced in the federal programs where you're put in a queue and not addressed, that we're taking in an evaluation of the entire award before we make any award. And then I have some other comments. You want me to keep going, or we'll do them one at a time?
Mayor and
yes, I think let's just get it all out and you know, okay. Don't feel trained to limit it to 1 or 2 items now. Okay.
Also, on the acceptance clause, I think since there's a lag time between the application time and the award time, then on the acceptance clause, they re-verify again they have not received any federal funding in order to make sure that you can, if you have applied and you haven't received anything, and then you apply for the city program, during that lag time of waiting to see if you receive any city, by the time you get the city dollars, you might have been approved on one of the federal programs. So I'd like to have an acceptance clause at the time of distribution to say, I verify I have not received any other federal funding and accept that in the terms and conditions of this grant, something like that. Thank you very much for making the outreach with the CDCs, the organizations that do outreach and deal with our micro business, the small businesses, and getting that word out and reaching them. They're usually ones that aren't part of chambers and larger organizations. So thank you very much. And I can't stress enough how important that is, and totally support it in any way I can to make that outreach more effective. And my other comment was, I understand last week we were at businesses 50 and employees and under. This week we appeared to have lifted that, and it's to all businesses, probably following the SBA's guidelines, which is 500 employees. My concern is that we're spreading the peanut butter so thin that you can't even taste it when it's done, that the larger businesses are more sophisticated, not only in their financial wherewithal, applications, reserves, abilities to get financing, abilities to be more resilient. And the smaller you get, it's harder. So if we were able to save a little bit of money and be able to reallocate that to the smaller business, even like an extra $100 to a micro business, a small business is huge. To a large business, you know, $1,000, $1,500, it's not enough to make any impact in saving the business. If you are a $30 million business, 300 employees, if you get $1,500, what does that mean? It's not enough to make an impact to save your business to whatever. You're better at doing larger measures. $1,500 to a small business that has 3 employees, that's huge between the difference of making it and not. So I do encourage it to be pulled back to our 50 employees or less, maybe even weighted for those who are 25 or less. So that's the conclusion of the comments I have at this point.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. I have a few questions and comments as well and some of Jen's comments kind of prompted some other questions for me. Jay, I did note that the process is that these companies make application, they're given the award, they sign a statement, as Jen indicated earlier, certifying that the funds are going to be used to pay these eligible expenses and that they have not received any federal funding. And that's great. I think that those are all nice safeguards to have in there to avoid misuse of these funds. Are there other? At one point, we talked about perhaps maybe even cutting the checks to the creditors, you know, to the utility companies or to the mortgage company or to the landlord. Is there an argument for that, or can you tell me why are we writing the checks to the awardees?
Mayor, this is. Let me try to answer that question. That's a great question, Mayor, and I know that's what we just said. We were writing a check to the businesses. And you bring up a really good point, because we don't do that when we do like household assistance. We actually, you know, if they go through Mesa Can, the check goes to the landlord or it goes to the utility. We talked about this late yesterday, and there are some risks if we just write checks that it's not going to go for the purposes we intended it to. So we're working on that. We need to figure out if a better way to do, the best way to do that may not necessarily just be writing a check to the business. But at the same time, there's some rules that guidance that we're trying to work around on Treasury about whether the city can just necessarily credit their account. So let us come back to you on it. You're raising a great question, and we understand the risk of just writing a check to the business and it not going to the purposes we intended. So we need to work on that. We acknowledge that, and we were kind of trying to work through that last night. We recognize we need to work on that some more. So before we issue checks or vouchers or have to work through a third party to remit checks to landlords and to the utilities, we may have to do that. But give us some time to work on that, please.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the technical assistance component to this program as well. But I'm just, I'm a little concerned about just ultimately getting reimbursed for those services. Who are the recipients of the technical assistance services going to be the businesses that are ultimately the awardees, or are it going to be a broader net that we're casting for that? And the reason I ask that question is, if I don't want this to morph into a program where we're just providing technical assistance to a small business technical assistance program. I think it still needs to be tethered to COVID, so that, you know, a year from now we're not reimbursing all this money to the federal government because we can't. We're assisting companies that obviously probably could use the help, but it's not COVID related. Yeah.
Mayor, that's a great question. Thank you for that. We do anticipate that the technical assistance program will also require a basic application, and will allow the company to explain how perhaps COVID has affected their business, and then they'll be able to select what areas of need they have for technical assistance. The application will not be as stringent as the financial assistance application, but we do, so for example, on the financial assistance application, there's a piece in there that allows them to select technical assistance in that realm. So we'll be able to follow up with them immediately, but we'll also open that up to all Mesa-based businesses who have a need for technical assistance. And it is much broader based, absolutely. And it will also be open to businesses who have received other CARES funding. So it's not as limiting as the financial assistance piece. And if I may just answer Councilmember Duff's question about the first come, first serve. This is not a first come, first serve. We actually open the applications and then close them so that we can look at all the analytics at once and actually play with different scenarios of funding based on maybe giving industries a certain amount of weight or giving those micro businesses more weight. We don't necessarily have a decision matrix set up right now, but we have all the fields in place, and then IT has built the analytics model and the dashboard so we can look at real time what's coming in for requests. We can sort by industry, we can sort by type of business, we can sort by size of business, and make some determinations based on that. So we do have that model in place that I think will be very helpful for decision making. And I think that was the last of your questions. Hopefully that helped answer.
Mayor, can I go to your question about the business assistance? This is the one of the areas in the guidance from Treasury that's pretty broad as far as business assistance. So I think we feel comfortable that while the direct assistance, we are trying to identify specifically businesses that have been impacted by executive orders or certainly by the COVID-19 impacts. We seem to have a pretty broad application from Treasury to assisting all businesses when it comes to this technical assistance. Obviously, what'll probably limit us more than anything else is just the amount of resources that we have available to do that. But our intention has been, while we'll provide direct assistance to those who meet the definition and go through our application process, that we would at least have for most of all businesses the opportunity to receive some technical assistance, as Jay just mentioned. So the guidance from Treasury seems to be pretty broad in that area. So we felt like this would be a nice opportunity to help all businesses to find, to get some opportunities to improve their business plans or their technology, and at the same time using some of our nonprofits that are locally based who can activate them and fund them to be part of providing that information and that training. And then really quickly on the discussion about the cutoff as far as businesses we're going to help, I don't recall that we presented the council we were only going to help 50 and less. If that was the case, we apologize, but I've gone back to the PowerPoint. I think all we did last week was to identify the number of businesses that were at 100 and the number of businesses at 50. And I think the conclusion was, in our estimation of 12,000 businesses, 11,519 had employees with 50 or less. But I don't think we intended that to be a indicator that we were only assisting those businesses. I think what we emphasized was if you had already received some federal funding, you would be ineligible. And the numbers we have, I'll just share real quick with council that I got yesterday in the state of Arizona. On the first round of PPP, there was 19,820 loans for $4.8 billion. So you can see that ratio. And then the second round was $3.7 billion for PPP. But it went out to 43,915 loans. So what the indicators are is that more of the smaller businesses got the more money in the second round. So there's at least 63, almost 64,000 loans that are out there helping businesses in the state of Arizona. I don't think that's enough, but that just gives you a sense of the magnitude of the assistance.
Yeah, my recollection of our meeting last Thursday is I think I'm probably the one that introduced the confusion over the size of the companies, because I knew we had been considering putting that limitation on it. I think staff did say that no, there is no limitation in the as it was presented last week. And I understand the concern over that. What we're, the target for this program are the smaller, less, the underbanked, less sophisticated, more at-risk companies. But I think the thing that will narrow it to that target audience is this requirement to have not received other federal assistance. Most banks, most businesses, I think, that are moderately sophisticated, that have relationships with lenders and that have some wherewithal, have already, already made application for and received some federal funding. So, if there's a business out there that has more than 50 or even 100 employees, and they shut down, that's a really big blow to this community, and that's a very deeply felt impact in the community. And so if they, I am interested in assisting them. And I think if they're applying for this program, that's probably an acknowledgement that they need some technical assistance and that they're fairly unsophisticated if they haven't figured out how to already be on the receiving end of some of the other grants that you just described. So I'm personally okay with, and again, before any of these grants go out, we're going to review them, staff's going to review them, and I think if there's a recipient in here that's arguably, not a worthy recipient, there'll be red flags that we'll be able to see. I appreciate the response on the technical assistance referral. I am in favor of giving as much technical assistance to as many businesses as possible. My only concern was if there's not an obvious nexus to the COVID situation, that we might just be creating a new city program that we're going to have to dig out of, other pockets of money to pay for. So it sounds like that's not the case. Okay, those are my questions. Council, any additional comments or questions on this item? Yes, Mr. Whittaker.
So if we're not defining small businesses by the number of employees that they have, then what are our stipulations for defining small businesses?
Well, we are using the guidelines from SBA, if that's the question for defining small business. Now theirs is pretty high; it's at 500, but that's why I think why we kind of felt like we didn't necessarily need to pick a number. If there's 12,000 businesses in Mesa, we identified that there are 11,834 that are under 100 employees. So kind of going where the mayor said, I think we felt like by requiring or saying we were not going to fund those who were received PPP, that we were already, it was eliminating a significant, quite a few. We believe there's probably at least a third of the businesses in Mesa, maybe more, that have received that kind of assistance. So effectively, if we think that 12,000 is probably closer to 9, so 9 or 8. So we'll see what kind of response we get. But we've tried to keep it that broad. But certainly, council wants to restrict that even further. We were just trying not to eliminate anybody more out of the opportunity, except for the fact that they had received funding or some kind of assistance already. And again, with emphasis that we're going to assist those on a higher priority, those that were directly impacted by executive orders, and then those that might have been indirectly impacted by executive orders, and then those who chose to close in order to comply with social distancing. So we've got those kind of identified in our process.
And so I wanted to suggest, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, the logic of why a small business wouldn't apply for and go out and get the PPP loan unless they were ineligible for some reason. So I would like to suggest that perhaps we don't tell people publicly that, hey, we're limiting you from receiving this grant if you already received the PPP funds. But instead, perhaps on this application, we just put a simple checkbox that says, have you received PPP funds? And if so, what was the funded amount of that loan? And then perhaps we can use that as a variable to filter, because it sounds like we're not just instantly granting these grants anyway. So if it comes back to council or staff or whoever, we can still use that variable to say, well, did they receive a PPP loan already? And then use that to somehow discriminate against those companies that may have already received some type of bailout, rather than limiting those individuals from even filling out the application in the first place if they believe they're ineligible. I mean, what if it comes down to the fact that a lot of these businesses have already received the PPP, and now we're not actually targeting enough businesses in general in Mesa, right? So we're missing out on a large group of businesses. So I don't know what the thoughts are on that, but I don't know that we should necessarily make it a limitation, but rather just a checkbox or something that they can tell us if they have received PPP funds.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. I think this process needs to be as transparent as possible, and I think we need to target the most vulnerable businesses, and so I think those would be these unsophisticated businesses that we've been describing. And it would be a nice problem to have is that we find that so many businesses are ineligible because they've received PPP funding. That's great, and I think that allows us to then come back with a second round of funding and with less restrictive criteria for who we're going to award. But I would hate to put. I want to be upfront with all the applicants, and I think asking the question because we want them to apply, but in anticipation of what we're not, that's a disqualifying answer. It's kind of, we don't want to waste their time or ours. So I like I say, I think it's a great point, Jeremy, but I think I would love to find that the PPP and SBA program has been so effective that we're finding businesses, we're having a difficult time finding businesses, that haven't benefited from that. That's great. I have no idea if that's what we're going to find or not. And so I think that to some extent, we have to try this, see what comes in. And then if we have the problem of having money left over, that's not a bad problem to have. We'll find other ways to insert that money into the economy with deserving businesses. Just my personal thought.
And Mayor, if I may, Councilmember Whittaker, thank you for that question. There are a large number of businesses too that we know have applied for PPP but have not received it. And so just because a business has applied, they can still apply for our program. They just could not have received the funds. And Mayor said we don't know how many will be applying, which is true. We don't have a way to gauge yet. We might get 500 applications, we might get 4,000. And so those would assumably be eligible to receive funding through our program. I think until we know the demand, it is hard to say. Would council want to open it up then for a second round of funding and make it more broad? We will have much more intelligence after we do this first round to see where the demand is and what specifically businesses need and what types of businesses and what size too. So we could, if there were funds left, take our intelligence and really craft a program for those businesses who need it most.
Okay. Well, I guess either way, when I spoke to the Asian Chamber, one of the issues that they had a problem with was that some of those businesses may have received the PPP funds or they were waiting. The problem is those Asian businesses have been impacted since January, and the PPP funds were only 2.5 times your average payroll, which means that they've already exceeded that 2.5 month period in which to apply those funds. They're actually back at square one again, where they're depleting their funds. And again, I'm not suggesting that we give money to people that have already received the PPP, but the issue is if we wait till a second round, we're going to have to reopen the program. We're going to have to wait another week to go get a second set of applications. And I don't imagine this application process is going to be very difficult or very long. So, from my perspective, I don't understand what the issue would be is adding a checkbox that says, have you received a loan from a previous PPP loan? But y- I'll move on from that issue. I do have some other questions. And one of the other things is I know on the PPP loan process, there's some things that make you ineligible for the PPP loan. Like I believe it has to do with businesses that are illegal as defined by the federal government. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? Things like this. So is it possible to put a checkbox on this application that says, are you ineligible for a PPP loan from the SBA?
Well, I don't know that I think the way we try to address the ineligibility is we have an ineligibility list that we've pulled from the SBA guidelines. So that is known to the applicant that if they fall into the list of our ineligible conditions that Jay shared with you or a summary of, then you would not be eligible. So we've taken that from the SBA rules, and then we added specifically the one on conflict of interest. So we've tried to mirror what and I don't know if we were selective. I think we just tried to be comprehensive of what we pulled from SBA. We're using the SBA guidelines in all respects in order to find some safe harbor for future audits. So that's why we pulled the ineligibility list from SBA guidelines. Jay, am I saying that accurately?
Mayor and Council, Chris, yes, that is correct. We, on the PPP application form, there are a number of questions that specify the applicant to say yes or no to, were they indicted or were they convicted of a felony or did they plead guilty? We can probably add some of that language at the bottom of our application where we're asking for verification and make it a little bit stronger if that is the desire. But the SBA guidelines do have some language in there about criminal activity is obviously ineligible, and I think there's some language about a felony conviction, but I don't know how far back it goes, so we can be more specific in language.
That would be great. And I mean, the PPP loan app that you're referring to is only 8 questions. So I don't believe it'd be adding too much overhead, just to tack those questions on there. And I think they have to self-certify about 10 different things. So I think there's 8 yes or no questions and then a self-certification of 10 different variables. So I don't see what it would hurt to make sure that we're using those same guidelines, which I believe they're using their application are the SBA guidelines in the first place. So maybe that was just their way of wrapping those questions into their application. My next question is, how long will the businesses that receive these funds, how long will they have to spend them? I know on that PPP process, you only had, or there was a little bit of confusion, but I believe you had 8 weeks to spend the funds once you received them. How long will these recipients have to spend down those monies?
Mayor and Councilmember Whittaker, we did not put a timeline in our application. However, the money does need to be expended by December 30th. So we can wrap that up in the certification that goes out to them. I have a feeling it'll be spent immediately once they do get the funds, but we can put a shorter time period on that if that's the desire.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the whole purpose of the program is to stimulate the economy, right? So if we're not putting a timeline that the funds have to be expended, or even, I mean, if we give it to December, I mean, what effect is that really going to have on our economy if we give these funds out and people could still use them for the utilities or whatever it may be? But what if they're like, okay, well, I'll just stick this in my savings account and when I open my business back up in,
That's fair.
I don't know, maybe they're going to close for 6 months. Maybe when I open in 6 months, then I'll spend the money. But this is going to have a net zero effect on our economy if we don't force them to spend the funds within a certain duration of time. So that would be my concern.
We can address that once when they're receiving the benefits. We can have some clause in there about that. That's a very good point. Well, we can put that in there.
Okay, and what is going to be the clause for funds that go unspent? So if whatever that duration of time is, maybe it's December 31st, what happens to the money that they don't spend by that day?
Well, I think that's, to your point, I think we need to almost have an effect that once they receive the benefit, it's already been identified how much they're paying in their utilities and that they're paying their landlord. It kind of goes back to the question I was trying to answer earlier to the mayor. We recognize we need to work on that, and it's almost the immediate upon receive the benefit, whether we give them a check or whether we actually have through a third party, they get the benefit, but the check's already being written to the landlord and to the utilities. So maybe they never actually receive a specific check, but the benefit is that they know the amount that was paid to their landlord, and they know the amount of dollars that was credited to their SRP account and to their Mesa water account. So maybe that will be the way we disperse the funds. We still have to work on that, but I think we're trying to avoid the fact of writing them a check that then they can go and have the option to spend on inventory or something else. So because we're trying to stay focused on rental and utility assistance. So we may just come up with a different method that they receive a benefit, but the check from us goes directly to those to those landlord or the utilities themselves.
Okay, thanks, Chris. The next issue that I have is on slide 10, where we talk about the three-tiered approach to this. So if I understand correctly, we're allocating 20 million of the 90 million that we're receiving from the feds to this program. How much money are we spending on each one of these three tiers out of that $20 million? Or is it going to be 20 million just for that tier one, and then we're determining tier two and tier three will come out of
No.
go beyond that 20 million?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Mayor and Councilmember Whittaker, no, the actual budget we had for the financial assistant grant program is 18 million. And the technical assistance we had assumed would come out of that depending on demand. I think there may be some willingness to go a little bit above and beyond that, but just in terms of that program, we don't know exactly how much that will be yet, maybe a couple $100,000. And then the marketing program will probably be another $200,000 across those different lines of audiences locally and the visitor market as well.
So if it's 20 million for the actual business assistance, the other two will be probably less than $1 million combined, is the thought.
Okay, got it.
Thanks, Chris.
And the other issue is I know in the PPP that they limited the amount of payroll per individual. Anybody that made over $100,000, you couldn't use that money for PPP. You had to cap it at 100,000. So, well, I guess we're not using it towards payroll. We're using it towards rent, mortgage,
Utility.
and utilities. So I guess that's not really applicable as it pertains to how they did that in the PPP program, right?
Correct.
Okay. And those will be the three expenses that businesses can use the money for.
That's our intent. Yeah, that's been our intention.
Okay. And I want to talk about the process a little bit. We had said that we're going to open this up and then bring it back to council. Now, $20 million spread out across, let's hypothetically say, 9 to 12,000 businesses is going to, I would imagine, is going to be a pretty long list of businesses, or hopefully if it's successful, it's going to be a pretty long list of businesses. What does the transparency in this process look like? Is staff going to go through all these applications, make recommendations, perhaps up into thousands of different businesses, and then provide us a list or a sheet of businesses and saying, this is how we think we should allocate the funds, and then we release the funds? Or how is that, what's the transparency in that process going to look like?
I'll give it a try. I think we've come up with a couple of different methodologies. One of the things we wanted to do is try to make it meaningful, but simple to administrate. So the idea is once we get all the applications in, there'll be a process where Jaye and her team have created a scoring matrix, I think is what they're calling it. And we'll run it through that matrix just to kind of begin to sort through the different sizes of companies and their needs. I think the initial thought was that we want to come up with maybe 4 to 6 different tiers within the eligible applications. And based upon the needs at the different tiers, probably based on the size of the company and their cost for rent and utilities, then we would create tiers for each of those, for all of the different applicants, maybe 4 to 6 of those tiers. And we would try to find a number, a flat number benefit for each of those tiers that businesses would fall in, that would be the benefit. And that way it would simplify the process for us to administrate the dollars. We're not necessarily trying to adjudicate between the rent of one individual with the same number of employees versus another that may be substantially more or less, or same thing with utilities. We're trying to, in a way, be consistent in how we treat businesses of a certain size throughout the city. And we're just trying to keep that equitable as well as simplified without necessarily doing a direct evaluation of each mortgage and lease and utility and determining whether that should be paid if it varies quite a bit between companies of different sizes. So I think we're trying to look at taking the tiers based on a company size and create a benefit for 4 to 6 different tiers, create a flat amount, and then figure out a way to distribute that. So it might mean that it'll be more of an average for their benefit for all the companies in that particular grouping, but it may not necessarily be a specific dollar for dollar amount for their identified needs. And again, we're trying to identify what we can do over a 90-day period, and that's something else we're be working with the applicants on too.
Okay, and do we have speaking of the size of business, do we have a cap on amount of money received per business? Like I know in the PPP they did 10 million?
Yeah, I don't know that we haven't created that, because until we see the applications come in, I think that may be a fair policy question we'll have to bring to council to see what your thoughts are on that. So I don't know, Jay, if you have any thoughts on that?
Mayor and Councilmember Whittaker, the couple of things. There will be a cap in each tier, and the business will not be able to receive more money than what they requested. So if a business is requesting, $3,500, and the tier that they could potentially fall in is a tier that would be a $3,000 tier. They can't go up to the $4,000 tier because they've only requested $3,500. We can't give them more than they asked for, and I'm anticipating that we'll probably give them a percentage, hopefully a larger percentage of what they're requesting, but it will not likely be 100% based on the number of applicants. The other thing in terms of the application process and the verification, the call center staff is actually going to be really just verifying that the documents that the applicant has submitted match what they're asking for in the application. And the company name is, we're actually blind. We're not able to see the company name per se. We'll see the company identification number that they get when they submit their form. So we won't know a specific company that's applied, and I actually think that's good. What the call center will be doing is just looking at, they submitted a rental request for $2,500. Here's their rental invoice that matches at $2,500. Or they uploaded a wrong form. We need to contact the company and let them know that they need to resubmit their rental form so that it matches up. And then once the application is marked as eligible and complete, then it comes over to business services, where we can then take the model and do some different sorts. But we'll be able to look at the number of amounts requested on average by size of company, by industry, by type of company, and then we can do some different modeling and utilization modeling from that point forward.
Okay. So it sounds like we're sort of just waiting to receive these applications so that we can run some
Right.
statistical modeling to figure out
That's-
what it is we're going to do as far as.
That's the one thing we can assure you, that's where we are, yes.
Okay. The other issue that I had brought up last week, I think it was executive pay. Is there going to be any limitations on, executive pay in these?
Again, we're not addressing
Monies that
pay,
we-
we're only doing utilities and lease, rent.
Well, right. I'm just trying to understand the definition of eligibility, right? Like, so are these companies that have, let's say you have an executive staff that makes, I don't know, $1 million a year on payroll or distributions. Is that going to somehow filter out or eliminate companies from receiving?
We don't have an item that asks for payroll. Again, with the majority of Mesa businesses, and I get it, there could be, but I think if you look at the ineligibility list, it begins to kind of sort those groups out. But we're really looking at the small, it'll most likely in Mesa, it's going to be 80% chance it's going to be or even higher, 80% chance it's going to be a business of 50 or less. And if they're, again, in a small suite office, they're probably gonna have very nominal utilities and their rent's gonna be, I don't know what the rent's gonna be, but it's not gonna be too much. So I don't know that we're spending a lot of time trying to sort through and verify payroll positioning. We've just kind of tried to be somewhat, just treat all businesses the same and try to get the benefit out the door and focus on, that's why we're just focusing on rent and utilities, because those we can verify.
Okay. So it sounds like we'll receive all of the data by the closing date, which is in the next few weeks, if I remember correctly. So I guess it'll be a lot more telling then, but I would.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say I'd like to see that data once that's released. It'll be really, I mean, that'll be the next step, right? So I guess all the questions are irrelevant until we know what that looks like or how we're planning on allocating the funds. And I don't have anything else.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments, council? Yes, Jen. Excuse me, Jen.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify a few things. First of all, as far as federal assistance, we've talked about PPP loans quite a bit this morning, but I assume when we're talking about federal assistance, it'd be all federal assistance, whether it be a EIDL or SBA loan, or a PPP, because there's several different funding formats available to small businesses. So I assume it's going to be all, so that we can clarify that for the businesses that are watching today. Also, I understand that the tiers have not been identified yet until we run this statistical analysis, whether it'll be by size or type or the financial needs. And then last comment, rent invoices would typically be a lease contract. There's usually no invoices issued.
Mayor and Council Member Duff, yes, that is correct about the lease contract. And then I'm sorry, the first question again?
About all forms of federal assistance for COVID.
Yes.
So the eligibility the questions at the front end of the application, it's really just asking, have you received any CARES Act funding, which are PPP and EIDL? If there's another specific CARES Act fund, then that would kick them out of this particular program. But if they have an existing SBA loan that was from 2 years ago, that's not going to kick them out of this program.
SBA loans were available through the CARES program and they revised a lot of the requirements that they usually have on SBA loans, and they lessened the interest rate they usually give. They lengthened the amount of time they usually did. So there is an SBA loan product out there available to small businesses. I know small businesses that have received it in order to use that loan to weather the storm for, I think it's like a 20 or 30-year note.
So if it's a new program that they're taking advantage of, that would make them ineligible for this particular program.
Okay, I just wanted to be more clear for the businesses that are listening, because there's a lot of interest in this program. And the other question I had was about the tiers, that we haven't really decided what those tiers are until we look at the statistical analysis of who applied. Is that correct?
Mayor
We haven't decided
Council,
by
that is
size,
correct.
need.
We have not decided the tiers.
Okay. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Other questions or comments? I have a quick question. Jeremy was suggesting that maybe we use some of the PPP questions on this application. And I wonder if that might, I mean, I think a lot of the folks that are applying for this loan, or this grant rather, they're doing it because they were ineligible for the PPP program. And so, I mean, certainly some of those things ought to disqualify folks from this program as well. For example, if they're engaged in businesses, cannabis or other things, you know, that are illegal. But if they, for example, maybe they are a convicted felon and they are have served their debts to society, and they're now trying to make their be successful in the world. Personally, I don't, and if that disqualified them from a PPP loan, that's who I want to target. You know, those are businesses and families that I don't want to see go out of business and be on the street. So I think the purpose of this program is to cast a broader net and to catch those folks that have fallen through the PPP program and provide some basic assistance for them.
Mayor.
So I would warn against just cutting and pasting the PPP questions for this program.
Okay, Mayor, I think it wasn't necessarily just PPP questions, they were actually small business SBA guidelines. Am I saying that incorrectly? So it wasn't just specific to PPP. What we're trying to do is we're pulling the ineligibility list from SBA, believing that would be a guidance that will be, I mean, those are kind of the references that take place in these Treasury guidelines, but we can circle back around. We understand your point, but we also want to make sure that Treasury, when they come back and ask us who we distribute the dollars to and what guidelines we used, I just want to make sure that there wasn't that there was an assumption that we would be following the SBA guidelines along the way. So I think that's where we are. We're believing that will be some kind of measure of looking at how we made decisions or who is eligible and not. And I think it was on the broader, not just PPP, but to the broader SBA guidelines. Am I saying that correctly?
I think so.
Yeah. But we can check again, but I think that's where we're pulling most of these ineligibility conditions is coming from the SBA guidelines that I think were probably in place before the CARES dollars.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, council, any other comments on this agenda item? All right, this is agendized to provide direction. I believe the consensus of council is for staff to proceed with this program as it's been discussed. Is that a fair consensus, council? All right, I'm seeing some thumbs up. No one is disagreeing with that. So thanks again. I know we appreciate all the hard work that has gone into developing this program so quickly. We'll look forward to updates and getting some of this money into the hands of those who need it and deserve it. Item 2 on this agenda is to hear a presentation, discuss, and provide direction on an update on the Mesa Cares program, focusing on the Mesa Cares Feeding Mesa program. Mr. Brady.
Yes, Mayor. We are, as many of you know, and have been assisting us with our Feeding Mesa program. We wanted to give you an update on where we are because we are moving forward with a lot of different programs. So we just want to let you know kind of where we stand on some of these programs, and what you'll be seeing coming up will probably be I think we've contacted many of you already, but more so in the near future as we roll out different versions of this program. So Mr. Hirschberg is here to provide us that information.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Mark Hirschberg, Parks, Recreation, and Community Facilities Department Director. Good to see you all. As you recall from a couple of weeks ago when we first started rolling out this program, we established a mission to, based on the community needs assessment that was initially done when the Mesa Cares program was started. And that's really to address Mesa residents' highest priority need of access to food. By providing nutritious meals and food to the Mesa residents who've been affected by COVID-19 by partnering with existing services, nonprofits, and our Mesa-based restaurants. The goal specifically of the food distribution program, which is the first one, part of the first phase of the programs that we rolled out, was to establish relationships with the various nonprofit food distribution organizations who have an increased need for assistance with the distribution of food due to COVID-19. So originally this started late March with assisting the United Food Bank with the Help Yourself Fridays distributions, moving them from their Javelina location to the Mesa Convention Centers for an extended period of time from 8 to 11 a.m. That partnership, pre-COVID-19, they were feeding up to 500 to 550 families pre-COVID. They are now serving, since we've initiated this over 5 weeks on those Fridays, up to 2,300 families, and that number has gone up increasingly each week. This past week, we have transformed the convention center now into a storage and sorting facility in the main hall. And yesterday, we did our first Wednesday distribution in partnership with the United Food Bank and with extended hours. This is the first time they've gone to a 2-week distribution with this long of an hour, so we'll continue to monitor and see how that works. But yesterday, we served 950 households in that 12 to 7 period, and we'll be back there again on Friday from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. In addition, as I mentioned, partnering with those agencies that already have services out there and are providing these services. This is really being stood up by the redeployment of our recreation and convention center staff who, due to closed facilities and the postponement of programs, we've redeployed them into assisting the community. And you can see some of the statistics there, but if I can digress for a second, Mayor, and just recognize the staff of this department. I've never been more proud and humbled to lead a group of professionals that, with the heart of a servant, they're out there day in and day out and have stepped up without hesitation, with a smile on their face to assist these agencies. And we were yesterday moving carts, moving food, and it was a true team effort in pushing them along. So I just want to recognize the staff and thank them for their willingness to get out there without question and assist these agencies. And in the short few weeks, we've already built friendships and relationships that will, between our department and these agencies, that will last well beyond this pandemic. So I appreciate them and all they do. And as well as the nonprofits. As you all know, there are a tremendous amount of nonprofits in this agency that are doing so much good for our community. And I think that's been even more prevalent and brought to the surface. And I just want to recognize the work that they do on behalf of serving the community as well. But with that, we've continued to ramp this up, and we're providing through about 40 staff over 1,000 hours each week, and that continues to grow to help provide the food services. And then also next Thursday, May 14th, we'll be partnering with House of Refuge and Midwest Food Bank to start a food distribution program in Southeast Mesa, which has some needs as well. So we're excited to partner with them and work with them to get that phase of the program rolled out next week. The canned food drives, all of you have been great and very supportive of our efforts as we rolled these out starting last Saturday at the Red Mountain Center and yesterday at Sloan Park. And those just two quick, and we had very little time to promote these and get them out. But in those two canned food drives, we've collected just shy of 3 tons of food. And a huge thank you to the community for coming out and helping us. As we've talked about, as people have stayed at home more and more, the shelves of the grocery stores continue to be stocked. And that's rerouted some of the foods, the non-perishable foods in particular that are typically routed to the food banks. They're now being redirected to the stores to keep those shelves stocked. So we appreciate the community and their willingness to go to the stores, pick up a few extra cans of food, jars of peanut butter, whatever the case may be, and bring them by any of the food banks or food drives, canned food drives that we'll be hosting throughout the community. Next Wednesday from 8 to noon, we'll be out at Eastmark Great Park at 5100 South Eastmark Parkway, and that's off of Ray and Eastmark Parkway on the parking lot on the side there. These will continue. We'll continue to monitor these and make adjustments on schedules and times and see if there's a better day in the week. But again, we've gotten a great response with just shy of 3 tons of food being donated early on. The next phase of the program that we are ready to ramp up and roll out next week is working with our local Mesa restaurants and helping supplement their businesses by working with them and buying large quantity of meals. There's really 2 needs out there that we identified that have a need for prepared and prepackaged meals. And there's a few nonprofit agencies that prefer to distribute meals and to their clients that way, and then those of our frontline healthcare workers. So we've spent the last week and a half really working with restaurants and determining their availability, their capacity to produce en masse, and then establishing some of the program requirements to ensure that the nutritional values are met, and then working through the transportation needs to move this food from the restaurants to the distribution points. So first with our nonprofit partners, they have a need for 1,000 prepackaged and prepared meals a day. So we're going to work with our caterer, our in-house contracted caterer, Personal Touch Catering at the convention center. And we're going to reactivate our kitchen there using, again, some of our full-time staff to assist with the packaging and preparing of these meals. And these meals will be prepared and then individually packaged, and then delivered by Waste Not Arizona in conjunction with the United Food Bank to the Mesa partners. I expect the average price point of these different meals and these services to be between $7 and $10 per meal. And then, again, getting those out, again, 1,000 per a day. I think that's a pretty impressive feat that we're going to put into the community of true need there. Our frontline healthcare workers support and working with Mesa Fire and Medical, they've identified some assisted living centers in the hospitals in 3 particular zip codes that are the hotspot areas, if you will, that continue to come through on the data in 85202, 85205, and 85206. In an effort to help the staff that work in those facilities, there's a need for 1,100 prepackaged and prepared meals a day. Our hope is by working with restaurant partners that we can serve the staff that work in those facilities and hopefully keep them in the facilities, allow them not have to leave to go out to get meals, help them during their shift changes, et cetera, by giving them a fresh prepared meal. We expect the average price point after talking to the restaurants to be between $10 and $12 per meal for this program. And we will start ramping that up again as I mentioned, early next week. To date, where we're at on some of the expenses that we've talked about, we are in the process of finishing up some final agreements, but we will fund the purchase of 3 refrigerated trailers for United Food Bank at $280,000. Helping the United Food Bank with some food purchases to help with the increased demand through the end of the year in the amount of $800,000. The convention center rental will be at approximately $650,000. And then their operations support. They've had to redirect as they've stood up these and tried to meet the demand early on. They've had to go outside of their normal budget expenditures for extra cleaning supplies, garbage, disposal, traffic control, cooling equipment, event materials, et cetera. So we're going to help them with reimburse them for those expenses that they continue to experience in the amount of $150,000. We've supplied a 12-week food supply of non-perishable food items to Midwest Food Bank in the amount of $200,000. For them to continue to keep up with the needs and demand, they have a need for an additional refrigerated trailer and some forklifts in the amount of $30,000 approximately. And then the MPS, Mesa Public Schools McKinney-Vento program, which is their homeless student services program. They have a need for some personal hygiene supplies, so we're going to assist them with funding for that in the amount of approximately $10,000. So again, the image there you see is some stickers that we're having prepared just to kind of help spread the message. And those will be placed on each of these prepackaged meals. We'll provide them to the restaurants and those that we're preparing at the convention center. And then to promote the Mesa Cares program and give another source of resources, again, with the website for those that are receiving those meals. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark, and compliments to you and your staff as well. Much like we were saying to Jay earlier, I think many of us have been to yesterday. I had the privilege of being at the non-perishable food drive and the distribution, and your staff are amazing, hardworking people. So compliments to you and your staff for the work you're doing. Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mark, tremendous job. Thanks for the presentation. My question goes back to the presentation you did, I think it was last week, on the meal cards that you were talking about. Is the food buyout program, the kitchen food buyout program, is that going to be in lieu of now the food cards that we were talking about distributing it out?
Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, I think that's the easiest way to assist the restaurants and help with tracking and everything else based on all of your comments and concerns. And I think we'll still get the meals into the right hands of the people that need them while supporting the restaurants and meeting the goals of the program.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I totally support this program. This is kind of exactly what I was looking for, is a way that was more transparent. That really kind of took the load off of the city and didn't make us all of a sudden put us in conflict with trying to compete with WIC. And so I think this is a great idea. The foods go directly from the restaurants to those that can distribute the meals in the targeted areas and so forth. So I think this is great. I commend you and your staff on the work that they've done so far and continue to do for our community.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, a couple of questions. Yesterday, I was able to participate in the food drive, and that was eye-opening, and I appreciate all the people who came and donated foods. I also appreciate utilizing and leveraging underutilized assets that we have in our city to help facilitate these programs, meaning the convention center. And I mean, that's huge to allow it to use your kitchen that we have, and then also the storage space to help United Food Bank, get the foods and meals out to the residents in our community. My question is how many other volunteers besides your staff assist in this program from other agencies? Do you have any idea of the additional volunteers?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, I don't have an exact number, but again, we're here to supplement the nonprofits and help stand them up so they can increase their distributions. So there's some cases where agencies out there with their distribution programs, a lot of their volunteers are seniors and are considered high risk. So they're not able to continue, they weren't able to continue to provide the kind of support they're doing. So our staff has helped them continue to keep up with that demand. In terms of the distributions that are occurring at the convention center, the National Guard will be out there on Friday to help us. It got really hot really fast early in the day, and we were all starting to drag about 3-4 hours in. So we did realize we have a need for more help, and United Food Bank has a wealth of volunteers that they they called on the fly, and people were showing up. So we're continuing to work with the staffing model and what that looks like. But for example, the food drives, that's all our staff. But at the nonprofits, we are just there as support and filling in during the increased demand.
All right, that answers my question. Great job. Appreciate all you're doing. all throughout the city and meeting the needs of our community and residents and businesses. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Luna.
Hey, Mark, I want to thank you and congratulate you for doing such a great job. I appreciate that you're working with your own caterers. You don't have to deal with the whole food handler licensing for your staff as we prepare foods to give to our nonprofits. So great job. Kudos to you. I participated in one last week, and I think you're doing an admirable job, and you certainly need to ensure or make sure your staff knows that we truly appreciate their hard work. And kudos to our wonderful nonprofits that continue to support our community. So I appreciate you working together in collaboration with us. So thank you, Mark. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. Council, other questions or comments on this item?
I got a question.
Yes, Jeremy.
On slide 11, it looks, I'm just looking at the allocation of funds to food bank, and it looks like we're giving a significant amount of more resources to the United Food Bank versus the Midwest Food Bank. Can just help me understand the rationale in regards to like how do we decide how to allocate those funds between each food bank? And are there other food banks that serve Mesa, or are these the only two food banks, or how do we decide on these two food banks?
Mayor, Councilmember, these are the two food banks that serve Mesa residents. And they both have, if you recall from our first presentation a few weeks ago, they both have different funding mechanisms and different ways of securing their food. And one is purely donations, one gets federal resources, and they both have had different levels of distribution needs and where they go. Midwest Food Bank only serves about 25% of the agencies they serve are Mesa-based. So we've asked them to make sure that the funding we're providing them is scaled to the Mesa agencies, and so that's scaled some of those. They serve a lot more agencies, but again, outside of Mesa. So we're making sure that these federal monies stay within the community. Whereas United Food Bank, upwards of 70 to 80 or 75 to 80% of those agencies that they are serving and those individuals are serving are in Mesa. So it's really just that based on their different needs, their different requests, and I speak with them daily, if not every other day, and make sure everything's okay in any ways we can help them. And again, Midwest Food Bank said, we're starting to see more food come in. This was on Monday. Is there any way you could help us with an additional trailer rental and a couple more forklifts and to move these pallets and everything around? So that was a request we're processing as we continue to work through this weekly, daily.
Got it. Thanks, Mark. And the other question I have is, out of the $90 million that we're receiving from the federal government, how much of that are we allocating to this portion of, what do we call this? I guess the overarching name of this is the Feeding Mesa program. Is that correct? And how much are we allocating out of the $90 million to this program?
Mayor, Councilmember Whittaker, again, yes, you are correct. Feeding Mesa program, $10 million has been allocated towards this program.
Is that up to date, or is that like saying that, is that backwards looking, or is that forward? Or help me understand what our projection, what is that number? Is that a future projection? Is that how much we spent so far?
No, it's the total budget, so if that's, I'm not sure what your question is. It's the amount we've allocated out of the 90 million for food security.
From March 1 through the end of the year.
Yeah, from March 1 through the end of the year. So it's both what we've spent, but looking out into the future. So it'll be encompassing everything related to the program.
Okay, and that the restaurant, this new program, the restaurant kitchen food buyout program, I assume that's a subset of
Sure, yes.
Yeah, okay. And do we know if what is the anticipation? Is the 10 million an adequate enough amount of funds? I mean, I guess I'm looking back at the fact that we just talked about the small business grant, and I believe, I don't remember the exact number, 18 or 20 million is being allocated towards small businesses. are we in fact allocating enough money or enough of the budget to this program to make sure that, we're providing something essential as feeding?
So far, we've been able to make some significant impacts. And so I think what you're seeing right now are what Mark's been willing to work with these agencies. On the front end, you see a lot of, or you see some of the higher end items related to capital. And we've got some large pieces of equipment and rentals. And so those on the front end, we don't expect those, we're going to buy so many or rent so many trucks and forklifts and things like that. So what we're hoping is that we think that's going to be that's a big significant impact to the number. And then at some point, we're just getting into the impact of just buying food and keep them supplied. Now, at the same time, we're also, you'll hear about this coming, we're also letting these agencies know at some point we will start scaling this back over time. So to stay within the budget, as well as just the staffing resources that we can continue to allocate to these programs. So, but for many of these programs, because we've been able to help meet some of their capital needs and help them stock up on the food, we think it'll continue for some time to allow them to continue to provide these benefits. But again, staffing that we're providing, eventually we'll have to scale that back over time too. So there is kind of a surge, and then there'll be kind of a ramping down with all this.
Okay. And on the restaurant kitchen food buyout program, what's the budget allocated to that specific program?
Right now, Mayor, Councilmember Whittaker, we're planning on, between both the nonprofit service and the frontline healthcare worker service, we've set a budget of $100,000 a week.
For how many weeks? What's the total?
Planned through August, through the end of August at this point.
So what's the total? What's the math on that? What's the total allocated budget?
I think that
to the end of
would be
August?
$1.2 million, roughly.
And the restaurants that we're looking at in this program, is there like an application process, or how are we finding the restaurants in Mesa that are going to be able to provide these meals?
Yeah. Mayor, Councilmember Whittaker, we worked with the Chamber of Commerce as well as Visit Mesa, and we're provided a list of 90 different restaurants, all geographically located throughout the city. And we personally made phone calls to all 90 of those restaurants to gauge their interest. Those that have called us back, we asked them to complete a survey that just identified capacity, different menu items, pricing, et cetera. To date, we've gotten approximately 24 of those back, and I know we were emails and phone calls were still coming into our staff yesterday, but we were tied up in food distribution, so they're working with those groups today to figure out those needs. But again, and then we will, if those restaurants can meet the need, we will work out an agreement with them that Mr. Smith and his staff have put together for us to utilize, and then we are building a weekly schedule to rotate between all the different restaurants in the geographic regions of the city to make sure we're spreading it out.
I guess my concern is the restaurants that aren't part of the chamber or aren't part of Visit Mesa. Is there any type of marketing or outreach that we're going to do to allow other restaurants is a form or something, some type of program that they're able to apply for this?
Yeah, we'll be happy to work with anybody else that's out there, and if we're missing them, and if you know of ones that the Mesa Cares phone number that's on the number there, 644-CARE. If they just call that, the intake center staff that's there, we'll get them in touch with our staff, and we'll be happy to see if we can work them into the program. But and we can certainly work with our PIO staff and put something else out on our social media if that's a desire as well.
But again, we're only going through August, and at some point we'll be at capacity.
Okay. I don't have any. Mark, thank you to you and your team for helping put the program together and dispersing the food. I know it's critical to the community, so thanks for that as well.
Thank you, Jeremy. Frankie.
Yeah, no, one of my questions was on the restaurant food buyback program. casting a wide net, I would support maybe just a brief application or like a form that can be sent out through social media that Mesa residents can fill out if they're interested, to cast out a wider net if we only receive 23 right now. So I would support that if we can distribute it to other restaurants as well. And then my other question was the coordination, Mark. How's the coordination with schools or the school district? I saw the specific program around homeless youth, but and they do get some free and reduced lunch monies. I'm assuming that will help, is helping now and then throughout the summer. But is there further coordination that we're doing with schools in distribution of food or adding additional capacity to pass out food there?
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, the Mesa Public Schools, we continue to meet with them weekly and have those conversations. They are currently fine and telling us they're fine and meeting the need of their students and the families they serve. We are working with Arizona Brain Food and Mesa United Way to assist them with additional funding opportunities to make sure that the summer meal program in particular is well dispersed and service for the community. And so we'll support that as well.
Mayor, we can't hear, is someone talking? We can't.
I apologize. My fat finger didn't unmute well enough. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Frankie. Council, any other questions or comments on this agenda item? I have a couple of quick comments. I just want to add my endorsement to what we're doing. The restaurant buyback program, I think I see it as not a program obviously that goes into perpetuity, but it's a one that has a pretty specific time and mission. And obviously we're trying to flatten the curve in our community. And to the extent Mesa has hotspots or areas that we particularly want to focus on, it's our assisted living facilities and sequestering those folks, insulating them from the disease and insulating the community from the disease that might be there. So this, I think, supporting those residents and those staff members, I think it is a worthy effort. And I don't see it going on for an extended period of time, but certainly right now, I think it's very defensible and I support it. I'm curious to get I think that this is a healthy exercise for the city of Mesa to kind of get into the food insecurity business for a while and to see what the needs of our community are and to see what the lessons that we take away from this are. I've been impressed that we have a larger disconnected at-risk senior population than I was originally aware of. And I've been exposed to the Meals on Wheels program and taken the opportunity to go out and participate in that. And that's a wonderful program and compliments to Astor Aging for the great work they're doing. But I think we can probably, I'm under the impression there might be a greater demand in our community than we are meeting for again, this at-risk disconnected senior population. And I'm curious to know if going forward, if some of the agencies that are involved in that right now have met their capacity, if we maybe one of the lessons learned from this experience is the need to nurture additional resources in our community to address that need. So I'll just be curious at the end of this, I'll be curious for us to sit down and talk about what the lessons learned are and see if we need to do some RFPs for some social services in Mesa that currently maybe are less than the capacity we would like them to be. Okay, thank you. Again, this is agendized to provide direction Council, would it be fair to say that we endorse what's been presented and want staff to proceed as they've indicated? I'm seeing.
I got one comment on that, John.
Okay.
I support it, but I think the fact that we've only identified, I want to go back to what Frankie said, only 23 restaurants. I think that needs to be broadly expanded as far as which restaurants are able to apply, or there's some sort of application process for the Feeding Mesa program. I don't like the fact that those restaurants have been selected by only 2 organizations. So I obviously approve moving forward, but I have a huge concern with that.
Okay, well, I think what they said is they started with a list of 90 that they reached out to, and but a point well taken. I think hopefully we can advertise to any restaurants in town if they want to be considered to be a part of this program that they will be given that opportunity. Would be my personal comments as well. All right, Council. So I think the consensus of Council is to endorse with some of the concerns that have been expressed, Council's or staff's presentation, and encourage them to proceed forward. The next item on our agenda is item 1C. This is to hear a presentation on the status of City of Mesa recreational facilities closures and discuss the development of future plans for reopening limited facilities. Mr. Brady and Mr. Hirschberg.
I think Mr. Hirschberg, Mayor, as many of you know, the governor has been dialing back many of the restrictions that have been in place since the beginning of April. And obviously that will impact us as far as our operations on the Parks and Rec side. And so what we wanted to do today is kind of give you an update where we stand, but also with the idea that we will come back to you with future plans next week about once we hear the governor giving us some direction about what is allowed to be opened up. We want to be in front of you next week with some of our plans about what that might look like as we bring open pools and other recreational facilities, keeping in mind both the opportunity to do so because of the restrictions that are removed, but also recognizing that we're still under some budgetary constraints as we do so. But we want to at least share with you kind of where we stand, because I think that's confusing. There are some cities that are kind of marching to their own drum. And so we're trying to make sure we don't get too far out of sync with them, but also we want to make sure that we're respectful of the governor's direction and the health concerns. So Mark's here just to kind of tee up conversations that we'll probably be having with council over the next couple of weeks.
Mayor, Council, as I shift back into my day job here, we thought, as Chris mentioned, we thought it would be good to just kind of give everybody an update of where we stand as you start to see different information from the different communities around us of what's opening and what's closed, and remind the community that first and foremost, our parks have remained open for passive recreation in the open areas that allow for social distancing throughout the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders, so people could get out and exercise and remain active. Our dog parks at Quail Run, Eastmark Great Park, and Countryside Park have remained open through this, and our skate parks and plazas at Reed Park and Fountain Plaza have remained open. We did make some adjustments in our restrooms, but we did leave open those that primarily serve our urban fishing lakes and our regional parks. But restrooms at Greenfield Park, Red Mountain Park, Pioneer Park, and Riverview Park have remained open, and the urban fishing lakes at Riverview, Red Mountain, and Greenfield remained open for use by the community. We have closed and postponed a number of things, including all of our recreation programs. Our recreation centers are currently closed. Our sports complexes are closed. Aquatics facilities, the convention center and amphitheater are closed. We've shut off the splash pads for the time being. Our playgrounds have caution tape and signs and are closed. The ramadas are closed. Volleyball, tennis, and pickleball courts remain closed, and those restrooms other than those that were previously mentioned are closed in those locations. As Chris mentioned, on Monday, Governor Ducey indicated that he was working with the fitness, hotel, and apartment industries to outline the details of opening gyms and pools. We are anxious and ready to hear what those recommendations are, and are working behind the scenes trying to develop different operational and reopening plans, and will adjust accordingly based on what the governor's recommendations are and what they provide. And as Chris mentioned, we'll be back hopefully next week, provided the governor gives us some guidance on what limited facility openings for gyms and pools are based on that guidance.
So, Mayor and Council, we'd like to come back next week with more definitive plans, but let me put this in context. As an employer of over 4,000 employees, our first and foremost priority is the safety of our employees. And so whatever guidance we come up with, we want to make sure that we make them available for the public, but at the same time, we have to protect our employees. And we have many employees that are concerned about the ability to interact and the spacing between them and the public. Certainly in the parks and recreation areas, we can maybe have some room to do that, and we'll have to come up with specific procedures. It will not be a return to a normal summer of activities, but we recognize there's a great demand and need for people to get back to some semblance of normalcy, and we want to assist that. And so we'll come back with some plans that will probably be more less than what we've had in the past, but certainly an idea that we can bring them on board over a period of time. And while many of your constituents may be focused on pools and Little League fields, you have to remember there's a tremendous amount of more public that we serve than just those groups. We have to begin thinking about what we're doing in libraries and even our business operations. We're already having discussions internally about what it looks like to open the doors again in many of our public facilities where we interact with customers and constituents. But we have to make sure we have a plan that first and foremost protects the safety of our employees. And we have had several incidences even this week where individuals have been in the workplace, have not felt well, they have symptoms, they have to go get tested, and it creates a tremendous amount of consequences and ripple effects throughout our entire organization. So we want to be very careful that we don't do anything that would put us in a position that several staff members would be exposed, and then we lose the ability to have facilities open at all because we have to close them because we just don't have individuals around to be able to function. We think this is very doable. We do think that we have an opportunity to begin opening things up with the governor's I guess, removal of restrictions. But I think what we're going to ask for is just some patience to allow us to do it over time. It'll cause us to phase these in, but we want to do that in a planned, purposeful manner. So that's what we want to present back or come back to council with next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady and Mr. Hirschberg. Council, questions on this item? Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I agree. With a slow transition, opening back up all of our facilities. My only concern is that going in, we closed everything down and not really seeing what the ramifications of the decisions were. And I know that we want to make sure that we're protecting our employees and that we're protecting the public as well from gathering. But it was brought to my attention by a constituent when you talk about the swimming pools and so forth, that there is a lot of kids that are swim and dive competition that don't have a place to train. And there's some that are trying to break records, or some that are trying to get to the Olympics and they have no place to train. And so I was wondering if perhaps we could open up Skyline and Keno on a limited basis just for the swim and dive teams to be able to practice, not host competitions, but to allow them an opportunity to a few times a week to come out and practice their sport. For those that are going to be competing once everything is opened back up, not only on a state level, but on a national level as well. So just throwing that out there, I would be in support of opening on a limited basis some of the aquatic facilities, specifically Kino and Skyline.
If you don't mind, I can weigh in on that a little bit because I had conversations with the governor's office specifically on that point before and after the press conference on Monday. And they were quick to say that, there is some discretion that's been given to cities on the closure of parks and park facilities. But they were crystal clear that on communal swimming pools, there is no ambiguity there, that those facilities are closed, period. And so should not be any communal swimming pool in the state of Arizona that is open for business right now. And so I think it's important that we have a plan in place and a couple of plans in place and the governor announced on Monday, I am going to open gyms and pools. I mean, so there's no mystery here. I mean, he's going to do it. That's on his agenda, and he's just working with the regulatory agencies to find out the safest ways to do that. So I think it's important that folks in the competitive swimming family in Mesa understand that there's not going to be any disadvantage for you being in Mesa. If there's a rogue pool somewhere in Scottsdale that is open, shame on them. They're breaking the law. And please tell me about them. And I will do everything I can to make sure that we have an even playing field because they shouldn't be doing that. At the same time, I think that swimming pools can be opened in a very safe way. And so I expect the governor is going to do that before long. The science so far is that the COVID virus doesn't sustain in water, and that chlorine and bromine, kill the virus. So I think really you could make the argument that the safest place in our entire city to have our kids is jumping in and out of little ponds of Purell, all over town. So swimming is not the problem. It's what goes on the decks. It's what goes on in the bathrooms. It's, mom and dad, hanging out on the deck and hugging kids. Hopefully somebody will answer that phone for me. Sorry. I concur that we need to exercise patience in this situation. But then again, I think we shouldn't. I think we need to be ready. We need to have plans in place so that as soon as we get the green light from the governor, we're not then starting from scratch, figuring out how we're going to respond to that. And I think that there's two types of customers in the aquatics. There's our Parks and Rec kids, and I'm encouraged. In a normal year, we're not opening up our pools in May. So we're really actually not behind the timeline when it comes to Parks and Rec programs. So it'll be interesting to see to what extent. I know we're going to be impacted. We're not going to be able to have the big swim meets. We're not going to be able to have the crowds. We're going to have to be extremely uptight, with regard to cleaning our restrooms, all of those things. We've got great professionals that will figure that out. But for the club and competitive swim programs, I think we've got to have something ready to go sooner than later. And it's going to cost them money. They're going to have to, they're not going to have the city and the school district to help cover those costs, for the first few weeks before those our programs are ready to contribute. My request, Mr. Hirschberg, is that you include the swimming community in your deliberations so that we, again, can have something ready to implement as quickly as possible. And that we have those plans that are on the shelf that can be quickly implemented once the governor gives us the green light. Mr. Luna, I saw you had your hand up.
I agree with you, Mayor. I think one of the things that we do have to take a measured approach as we look at open some of these facilities. We might look at it regionally within our own city of Mesa, east, west, maybe north and south. But it does have to be a measured approach. It needs to be well thought out, including some of these members of our community, our swimming, if you will, community. They're really anxious to get in the pool and to be able to compete and to get their fit in place. So I wouldn't really rush to. I don't suggest that we rush into this. We need to take our time as we approach this because we certainly don't want to. We don't want it to reach its ugly head again. And we want to make sure that we're keeping our employees safe and secure, and that they don't get the virus, as well as our community members. So, Mark, I would suggest just take a measured approach as you move forward. You might want to look at it regionally in terms of our city size, and then bring in some of these community members to provide some input.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor and Mark, Chris, for your comments. I'm going to go back to the prior presentation where I asked about the volunteers. Mark, I'm assuming that if you had to re-engage our swimming pools, that you would have to bring some staff back in from what they're doing currently. Is that correct?
Mayor, we would actually need to, not so much the full-time staff. Yes, we'd have to redeploy a couple of full-time staff out of the food program back into the aquatics in particular, but more importantly, we need a process to rehire those part-time staff that have the certifications to lifeguard back into through the city process.
So what's your timestamp on that, Mark? I mean, the mayor says that typically our pools are not open at this time in May. However, so what are we looking at?
And we typically open for public programming and open swim Memorial Day weekend historically. In working with Terry Overby and her staff in Human Resources, they are working to figure out what a streamlined process would look like to do that, but we still believe it's approximately 3 weeks to onboard that part-time.
Yeah, so I guess one of my thoughts is using internal volunteers. I mean, we have, and I know it's not active right now, our Mesa Connector program, Mesa Fire and Medical Connector program, volunteers there, and they could, I'm just throwing this out. There's possibly, if they're re-engaged and taking the same PPE measures that we're currently providing our employees and volunteers from other agencies, they could step in and provide support and help with your staffing issues. And then taking back, I'm not management. I'm just sharing some of my thoughts, kind of knowing that then you can redeploy some of your staff to help with their aquatics program and other programs. I know that you're getting pressure, and so is our emails as council members. But I look forward for next week's re-engagement on this topic so that we can discuss it. And as we better understand this disease process, I just want it's a big learning curve, but then again, it's no different than any other disease processes that we have in our society. But this one here has taken precedence. So thank you, Mark and Chris.
Thank you very much. Council, additional questions or comments on this item? Okay, well, we will, Mark, we'll look forward to seeing you back next week. And again, thank you for all the work you're doing on so many fronts related to the challenges we're facing right now. The next item on our agenda is item 1D. That's appointments to the Housing and Community Development Advisory Board. Mr. Luna, are you making a motion?
Yes, I'm making a motion. The recommendations I suggested.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any discussion on this item? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Here's my roll call. I vote aye. Mr.
Aye.
Freeman. Thank you. Mr. Whittaker. Mr. Heredia.
Aye.
Ms. Duff.
Aye.
Mr. Luna.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Next item on our agenda is current events summary, including meetings and conferences attended. Again, Council, I know I've been seeing you being very involved in the community. Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that Eastmark, and this was in one of our presentations, we're going to have the canned food drive-through at Eastmark's Great Park. That's Ray Road and Eastmark Parkway out in District 6, southeast part of Mesa, next Wednesday from 8 to noon.
Great, thank you. We'll see you there. Yes, who's next? Mr. Luna. Mr. Luna, you need to unmute.
Okay, sorry about that, Mark. Yes, Tuesday I convened another NLC HELO meeting with board members across the country in terms of engagement. We are going to continue having these bi-monthly meetings. This afternoon, we are going to have a presentation. I'll let Mr. Heredia talk about exactly what that's going to be about. And then I do want to mention that ASU recently showed us some resources that are available for learners at home, those that are lifelong learners like myself and many others in our community. Some free a website that provides those great opportunities. So if anyone is interested, you can go to ausu4u.asu.edu and you'll find a plethora of great programs and classes for the community. So I do want to encourage community members to look that up and get some free education. So that's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. Mr. Freeman, did I see your hand up? Okay, thank you. Frankie, and then Jen.
Just commenting on what Councilmember Luna mentioned. Today at 2 p.m. we have a small business summit, digital summit in Spanish. So log on to Mesa en Español Facebook page or Mesa Channel 11. We'll be live. We have a panel representative from SBA, from local chamber, and from the city talking about questions around the assistance both federally and locally, and hopefully folks can tune in and get more information, ask us questions, and go from there. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Frankie. Jen.
Yes, I want to thank everybody for participating in Mesa Family Takeout Night, which was last night. I enjoyed a wonderful meal at Nantaporns, and I saw that the mayor, I think you were at El Venayo, as well as many others. And thanks to the Mesa Arts Center for their arts program that is in conjunction with that and doing some arts at home. This continues every Wednesday at Family Takeout Night for $44 or less. Throughout July, and it has an arts component to it. So check it out and visit mesa.com and the Mesa Family Takeout Night, and Together in the Desert is the arts project. Also, thank you, Councilmember Luna, for mentoring the ASU for You. I did look through that program myself and saw a lot of different things for children all the way up to elderlies like me, or all kinds of educational programming that are very interesting and really can serve us at this time. And then lastly, I just want to say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And thank you for all that you do, especially during these challenging times and bringing family together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duff. Mr. Frank.
Yeah, man, I think it's National Clerks Week, isn't it?
Wow. When is it not National Clerks Week?
Yes, Vice Mayor Freeman, it is National City Clerks Week.
Okay. Well, we want to thank them, our clerks, for all they do. I know they have a tremendous task, so appreciate your service and work.
Thank you so much.
Amen. Other comments, Council? Well, I just want to, and I know my fellow council members join me in expressing our condolences, Jeremy, to you and your family for the loss of your father. We all feel your loss, and hope you know that he was very proud of you, and we hope that you and your family get back to normal quickly.
Thanks, Jay.
Scheduling of meetings, Mr. Brady, what are we looking at?
So Mayor, we'll be meeting again next Thursday. We'll probably have some updates. We're going to also present to you a few new programs as we kind of continue with our Mesa Cares program. We're going to focus on some programs related to the homeless, which were identified as a priority. And we may be able to present to you a program that we're working with Mesa Can on how we can help individuals with their utility payments, those that are falling behind. So we're working with them, and hopefully we'll be able to present both that program as well as the homeless program next week.
Okay, thank you very much. This was a great meeting. We talked about some important things. The next week is going to be a big week in the city of Mesa. We're rolling out our small business assistance program. So I think it's important that we all shout that from the rooftops. We want to have an overwhelming response from our community. We want to get this money where it belongs as quickly as we can. Also, as we noted, we're going to be spending this week with a lot of planning for opening up our parks and pools and fields. And so I know that impacts many thousands of people in our community. So I hope that we, the community will share emails and tell us how you feel about that. As Mr. Brady indicated, safety has got to be our number one priority. We want to protect our city employees and we want to protect our public. But we also understand the significant role that these programs and facilities play in our lives. So this will be a busy week as we come up with plans to address those issues. So we look forward to the public engaging with us on that discussion. If there's nothing else, council, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you, Mr. Freeman, seconded by Mr. Thompson. Please unmute your microphones. And I will ask all in favor of adjourning to please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned.